Hello and welcome to Climbing the Interface Ladder lecture number 4, Advanced Interfaces. So in previous lectures we have taken a look on how we can set up a basic interface, how we can customize it even further, how to synchronize data and all of those things, but now it's time to dig deeper into some more advanced things to see what we can do with our more advanced interfaces. So well, let's get started, shall we? So here you go. Here's the GI machine that we've used in previous lectures. And what I want to do is draw mouse over text. Okay, so what are these things? Mouse hovering text, you can call them as well. Well, basically when you move your mouse and you move it and hover that over an item in Minecraft in an interface, it's going to show you a little box with information, right? Yeah. What if we want to show our own little boxes with information in? Well, it's fairly simple actually. And what we want to do is head over to where is it? Here. Draw GUI container foreground. So we want to draw it in the foreground. We want to draw it on the very top here. So what we want to do is head to the end of this method, and here we're going to add some code for it. And what I'm going to do is check that type equals 4. And the reason why I check if the type equals 4 is because, well, that's the custom one, and what I want to do is show some information when you're setting your custom your custom layout for the anvil drops. So that's why I check if type equals 4 there. We're already calculating type up there, so it's totally fine. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, obviously we'll have to loop through all the rectangles that we have to work with. Rectangles like so, dot length, there you go. And like before, we just grab the first well, not the first, but the current rectangle like this. And how do we want to do this? Well, obviously when we draw some mouse over effects, we only want to draw them if we're actually hovering our mouse over it. Otherwise there will just be information boxes all over the place. Well, we could do it like that, but like I said, we would just have information boxes all over the place and we wouldn't really be able to tell anything at all. So what we want to do is if rect.inRect, like so, we give it the interface and x and y. So as you remember from last time, hopefully, we get the x and y here in the background layer, but luckily enough we get the x and y in the foreground layer as well, so we can just refer to those without a problem. So there you go. So if the mouse is actually inside this rectangle, then we want to draw a foreground, well, a mouse hovering text there. And well, it's not too tricky actually to do. Most things are already done, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel or anything. But what I'm going to do here is create an array list with some lines. Okay. And this is what I want to draw in the end on the screen. List string like so. There you go. I need to import the array list as well, so Control Shift over there. There you go. So what we want to do here is just add the content we want to show, and I'll call it lines because each element in this array list is going to be, well, one line in when we draw it. So if we want multiple lines of text, then we just add them as different elements. And what I'm going to do here is just do if machine.custom setup. That's if this current rectangle here basically is selected or not. So if that's the case, what I want to do is lines.add active, because then it's obviously active. Then I want to add lines.inactive if it's not inactive. Inactive, I can't spell. There you go. But well, it doesn't end there. We can add multiple lines. So I'm just going to add click to change here, like so. So what do we do now? Now we obviously have checked that the mouse is in the current coordinates, well, inside the current coordinates of the rectangle, and we have created an array list with the text we want to draw. Well, then we can refer to a method called draw hovering text. There you go. So what we need to give it is, first of all, the list here. So that's the lines. Then we need to give it the x coordinate, but it's not just giving it x here. We need to do x minus GUI left. And the reason why we have to do this is because the mouse coordinates are given with the GUI left and GUI top in them, so they are not 0, 0. you know, yeah, well, if they are 0, 0, then they are actually 0, 0 on your screen, not in the interface. But when we draw things on the foreground layer, then 0, 0 is the very top left of the interface. So there's a lot of to keep in mind here, when to use GUI left and when to not, and if you should subtract it or add it or so on. So I'm going to set up a different system so we don't have to keep that in mind, but we'll take a look at that later on. Font renderer. And then we need to give it the font renderer, the one we use to draw strings with, and that's that one that we have used before. So there you go, that's pretty much it. We check that the mouse is actually in the coordinates. We generate some text here that we want to draw, and we have that in an array list to give it different well, lines like so. And finally we use draw hovering text. We give it a text like so. We need to subtract GUI left and GUI top when we do so, but otherwise we just refer to the mouse coordinates like that. And finally we give it a font renderer to draw with. Let's take a look. Yeah, I can use this word. It's well, it's totally fine. But yeah, it's dark. I was wondering why it wasn't loading. But we can ignore those things here. Just move over here. And if I place this block here, I will. Well, obviously nothing happens because I don't have a type. But if I give it a type there you go. Very, very simple, very easy to make it work. Now when I hover over these, I get an inactive, but if I move the mouse over to the left, I don't get that information box. If I click here, it's going to say active, because now all of a sudden it is active. But I click the change line, it's always going to be there, because I'm adding it there no matter what. It's well, I need to be, well, have the mouse inside the rectangle, of course, but it doesn't matter if it's active or not. Like that. There you go, pretty sweet. But, well, it's quite tricky to see. Everything is just white. Maybe we should add some colors. Colors are nice, right? Well, if you don't do it too much, but, well, let's take a look on how we can work with some colors. And what I'm going to do here is create a class to help us with that. We don't have to do that, but it's just going to be easier. Well, did I say class? I meant an enumeration. So, I want a GUI color here. Maybe I should call it GUI color helper or whatnot, but it doesn't really matter. So what I want to do here is set up a way of very easily load the different colors that we can use. And by default we can have 16 colors without well, having to do any advanced things. If we just want to do normal stuff, then we can do so with 16 different colors. And the way I want to set it up is basically to add those here. But that's not enough. I want to give them an ID as well. We'll see very soon why I want this ID. So it actually does matter what IDs they have. Green has to be 2, you know, cyan has to be 3, and so on, because those are basically their IDs when it comes to rendering. So I'm just going to add the different colors here, and obviously you don't have them to have them in this order, but like I said, you need to have the correct IDs. Orange, that's number 6. Then we have light gray, that's number 7. We have gray, that's number 8. And if you don't like my spelling of gray, then, well, you will have to live with it anyways. Light blue, 9, like that. Lime, that's the next one, that's 10. And the color I can't pronounce, turquoise or something like that. Like I said, can't pronounce it. Well, I don't know if I can. And finally, well, not finally, we have some left. We have pink. We have magenta. So you probably recognize these colors from Minecraft. They are pretty much the same. Yellow. That's going to be 14. And finally, we have white, 15. So 16 different colors, like so. From black to white here with well, quite a few colors in between, but as you can see, we don't have any possible color. Okay, so what we want to do here is actually give it a constructor, because that's why we have errors all over the place. We're giving it an integer, but there's no constructor with an integer. There you go, much better. No errors anymore. And the only thing I want to do with this number is to store it. Okay, there we go. So just store it for now. But what we want to do now is the whole magic part with this enumeration, and that's to override a method, the toString method. So as you probably know, every single object in Java can be converted to a string. It's well, for enumeration, the default is to just give it the name of it. For some objects, it's just give it the memory address, like where they are stored on the computer. So it's not really that useful in many cases, but we can override that and define ourselves how we want that to be returned. So what I'm going to do is just return, and here comes the weird part. Return. We need to give it a tag, a color tag. This is a color tag when it comes to Minecraft text rendering, and what we want to do is well, start with \u00a7. Okay, that's just how it is, and then we want to add a number afterwards. But we don't just want to add a number, because obviously we then would get 2 digits here and 1 digit there. We want to convert it to hexadecimal. Okay, and if you don't know hexadecimal, it doesn't really matter too much. The only thing we want to do is this part here, and what that's going to give us is 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on, all the way to 9 here. 10 is going to be A, 11 B, 12 C, D, E, and F, and so on. I know the alphabet. Nice. So we just add that in the end, and if you don't really understand what the hexadecimal thing is, then it doesn't really matter. This is just how we define the correct color tag for these different colors up here. Okay, so far so good, and this is it. Now we can use this in a very, very easy way. How? Well, when we refer to an enumeration of this type, we can just get a string normally, like we have overridden how that works. So if I want to add a color now, and remember I called them color tags, so what we want to do is just add them in front of the text that we want to draw. So GUI color dot green, like that. Done. Now the active part will be green. Why? Well, we wanted to add that weird color tag in the front, but since we have defined that when we have a GUI color enumeration value and converts that to a string, we don't do it the normal way by just giving its name, well, basically saying green, but we have told it, well, return this type of weird color tag instead. And therefore, when I try to concatenate the enumeration with a string, obviously we first convert the enumeration value to that color tag. And then if I want to do this, well, make this yellow, then yellow, what am I talking about? Red. This is the one I want to make yellow. GUI color. So there you go. It's very simple if I spell GUI properly. Yellow. There you go. All the colors there, and we can just refer to them like that. Obviously, you don't have to set it up in an enumeration like this, but I recommend doing it in something like this. We could, of course, just add the tags directly, but that's going to be a bit confusing and a bit tricky to keep track of. So let's give it a try, shall we? Move it up there so you can see it properly. And now if we open the interface here, we can see the same thing that we saw before, but they are using different colors. And since I used green there, we have a green active one there, the inactive one is red, and the click to change is always yellow. So maybe a bit too much with the colors. Maybe we should just make the click to change the default gray one. Or I can't remember if the default is gray or light gray. I think it's the gray one that is the default one that we usually have. I don't know. Maybe it's white. I can't remember. But it doesn't really matter. You can just add the different colors that you want, like so, preceding them with the tag you want to. And by using this enumeration, it's just very, very simple to add the color that we want. If we don't add any tag at all, it's just going to draw that in well, the default color, whichever that was. Okay, so far so good, nice. But I still think it's a bit annoying with the GUI left and GUI top. Like, how does that work? Like, what should we do there? So I'm going to modify this a bit, how we can use it to sort of, well, allow us to reuse it later on, because we're going to draw more hovering text for sure. So let's head over to GUI rectangle. I think that's a good idea. Okay, and here we might want to, well, do something. We might want to add, you know, public void draw string. Totally, a graphical rectangle should be able to draw a hovering string for it. And for that we need a machine, the GUI there. We need the mouse X, oops, like that. We need the mouse Y. We need the string we want to draw. Okay, seems legit in my opinion. But we only want to draw that when it's actually in the rectangle. So in rect, and we can just calculate this. We have all the information we need. There you go. Because, well, we have that method up there. So this time we just call this method and it's going to do it for us. However, we're a bit in trouble here. This method draw hovering text, we won't really be able to access that from the GUI rectangle. But what we can do is just a similar way of what we've done here. So the only thing I'm going to do is just protected void draw hover string, let's call it that. The list that we want, maybe we should name it properly, and the X and the Y, you know, just sort of a wrapper here, and it doesn't know about list, but we want a util one, that one, the top one, java.util.list, and then it's just a matter of using the information to actually call that method. So if we move things away, like put them in other classes and so on, we'll sometimes have a problem that we don't have access to the methods we want. And if we really want them, then it's pretty easy to just make wrappers like this. Font renderer, like that. There you go. And now we can just head over to the GUI rectangle again and refer to GUI.draw hovering string, like so. That's the wrong thing. No, that's the correct thing, sorry. And what we want to give it is the mouse X, but not only the mouse X, right? What do we need to give it? Well, we need to subtract it with the GUI.getLeft. So now we do that. Obviously we'll have to do it sometimes, but then we won't have to bother about it anything well, later on at all. We just have it here and that's fine. Do it once, don't have to bother about it. And that's what I like. I don't like to have to bother about the GUI top and GUI left because those are just annoying. Okay, so the list here. How do we get that? We just have a string. That's just well, yeah. Well, that's just one piece of information. That's just one sequence of characters. So what do we want to do with that? Well, what if we just tell it, well, can you split this string apart in different pieces, in different lines? If we add a new line character, you know, \n, maybe it can split it like that. Yeah, totally. Let's do that. So the string and split, if I can spell split, there we go. And then just ask it to split it at \n. So now all of a sudden we get an array of the different lines if we put a \n in between. And how do we do it now? Because we have an array, not an actual list. So what we'll have to do is the following: arrays dot as list. So we can actually refer to that and it's going to convert an array to a list for us. And there we go. Obviously, well, we're now referring to it as a string only. If we don't want to, then we don't have to. I like to set it up like this so it's very easy to refer to. We're going to see later on in this lecture why it can be good to do something like this. We'll see when it becomes very well, when it becomes very nice to have it. Okay, so now we might want to, well, like add it here to the old code. So what we want to do instead is just string. We can go text if machine.customSetup, like so. Then what we want to do is text equals GUI color dot green, like so. Otherwise we want to add text equals GUI color. So as you can see, the colors are very easy to refer to. I don't have to remember what numbers they have in active. So that's good with the enumerations. That's why you use them in the end. And finally we want to add a new line. We do it like that. And then we want to do, well, add a color. GUI color.yellow, like so. And finally the click to change here. When we have done that, rect.draw string this X, Y, and then the text. There you go. And we don't need this. There you go. So obviously we still have to add quite some code here. We just have to generate the text and then tell it to draw it like so. But I like it this way. It's very easy to just refer to, tell it to do the job. And when you want to do things multiple times, just write it once in a method and then, well, call that. We're going to see in just a second, well, when we can have that again. So let's take a look on the textures I have. We need to do something new now. So I'm going to head over to Assets here, Example, Textures, GUI. I'm using this machine texture here, but I have a machine 2 texture that I prepared, which contains quite a few things that we're going to use. If I'm opening this, we might be able to take a closer look at it. First of all, we have a big box here. What's that all about? We have 3 different blocks here, and then we have some weird gray things at the bottom. We're not going to bother about these for now. We'll take a look at those later. And what we're going to talk about are these 3 things. What I'm going to introduce, or well, what I'm going to create here, is a tab system, so we can have multiple tabs that do different things. And this border here is basically the box where we have the content of the tabs. Why do I have 3 of these? Well, I have one that is just a normal tab. I have one that is another texture when we're hovering over this tab, like having the mouse over it, and this is the open tab. It might look a bit weird, but we'll see in just a second why it's actually going to look like a tab. More to that in a bit. So I'm just going to use that texture instead. Modify machine to machine 2. Like so. And what we want to do now is create an array to store our tabs in. And as we can see here, we are storing the rectangles as static. I'm not going to do that for the tabs, and there's a reason why I don't want to. We'll see that later on. But what I'm going to do in the beginning, we could have them static, but I'm not going to, just because later on we'll change it around a bit in a way that's not going to allow us to have them being static. Or well, it's going to be weird to have them static at least. Okay, here we go. So what we want here is a list of all the tabs, but then also want to store which one is the current one. Okay, and these are just GUI rectangles. We want to draw those rectangles that we saw in the texture sheet. Okay, so far so good. Tabs equals new GUI rectangle 3. So we want 3 tabs, that's fine. That's what we have room for. Well, I think we can squeeze in a 4th if we wanted to. So obviously when we want to draw the tabs, we need to have something to click on, something that is being rendered that we should click on, and that's, well, those are these tabs here. So tabs at that specific location equals GUI rectangle 80 plus I times 16. So that's so we put each and every tab below the previous one, and the tabs are obviously 16 pixels high because that's why I had 16 in there. There you go. And finally we want to set the active tab, and I'm just going to set that one to the tab at index 0. So I messed that up. The index 0 should obviously be at the tabs, like so. So there we go, we just create them. Now it's a matter of rendering these ones and be able to set the active tab. How do we render them? Well, obviously we head over to draw GUI containing background and put the code right here, just before we bind the wrong texture, well, the wrong for rendering the tabs at least. So for GUI rectangle tabs, like so. So we just loop through all the tabs, and depending on, well, some different things, we want to have the source to be different. The source Y starts at 43, that's the top one, but if we want to pick another texture of, well, another version of the tab, we might want to increase it to go through those, and that's exactly what we want to do. If this specific tab that we're trying to render is the same thing as the active tab, that means that the tab is the active one, obviously, then we want to increase the source by 32. Otherwise, if well, the mouse is inside the rectangle of the tab, then we want to, you know, increase it by 16, so use that texture instead. And finally, we want to draw it all with the information that we had. We have that one there, and then we have the x size, so that's just where they are placed in the x coordinate. But then we have the source y, which is going to depend on a few things. And those things are obviously if it's the current tab and if we're hovering our mouse there. What's left? Well, we might want to be able to change the tabs, and that's obviously when we click here. So what I'm going to do is just for GUI rectangle tabs like so. And when we have a specific tab here, when do we want to change that? Well, if the active tab is not equals to tab, so we're actually having another tab than the active one, we shouldn't do anything when we click on a tab that we already have opened, right? Nothing should happen. But otherwise, we do tab.inRectangle, like so. So if it's in the rectangle, then we obviously have clicked it, and therefore we should change active tab equals tab. And break out. Okay, let's take a look. We'll take a closer look on the code in just a second. Here we are. Now we should have these three different tabs left hand side. That's where I put the coordinates, where I put them. And there we go. I put them at different well, heights, and I put them just on top of each other. But as you can see, I also put them exactly on the correct spot. Obviously, I tried this before. So what I'm doing here is slightly overlapping the border here. So we have this border here that we put in the texture, but I'm overlapping with 1 pixel. Just 1. That means that if I have an open one, I'm going to draw a gray background on top of the border, which sort of going to give us the illusion that the content in here is actually continuing over into the tab, which is going to make it look like that's the active one. Then we can hover here and click here. As you can see, now that looks like the active one. Like so. So that's basically how you do the graphical part of a tab. You just have different textures and put them so we have the open one here. We can have even more textures if you want to. Maybe you want to have different versions of open tabs. Like at the moment it's not going to do anything. If I hover here, we might want to change something like that. So it's fairly simple, this part here. We don't just have different rectangles that we change, and when I click on any of those, then it's going to change which tab is the active one. And obviously at the moment these are only graphical boxes here. They are just rectangles. They don't do anything. We have the same content no matter what. We'll take a look on that in just a second. But before that, what I want to do is give them some text. Maybe we want to like have different titles, so when we hover over the tab, it's going to say, alright, this is this tab, we can do something with it, and so on. So what I'm going to create is a GUI tab. Yeah, seems like a good idea. But obviously, when we draw this tab thing in there, to the very left, we obviously want to draw it as a rectangle as well. So what I'm going to do is just extend GUI rectangle, like so. Okay. What do we need? Well, we need a constructor, but I don't want that constructor. What I'm going to do here is just do two things. When I create a tab, I want to get a name and I want an ID. Okay, what's up with that? Well, as we saw up here, when we created a tab, what we did was simply, well, give it an ID and then just give it these coordinates. So why not just move these over here? Sorry, not a name. That's not supposed to be there. Like so. Rename it to ID, and there we go. So it's much easier if we don't have to specify the specific coordinates. We have specified the ID, and then it's going to be created properly. Like so. Otherwise, we would have to define the location multiple times, and so on. But of course, if we wanted to be able to place our tabs wherever we wanted, then it might be a better idea to actually force the coder to actually set those locations. We want to store the name like this. Name equals name, and finally return the name. Public string get name, like this. Okay, so far nothing too special. What we have here is just a special version of a rectangle that also has a name, and when we create it we only give it an ID and it's going to generate its location and size on its own just from that ID. Right, so what we want to do here instead is obviously change so the tabs, they are not rectangles, well they are, but they are a GUI tab, and that's the active tab as well. We want to change it there and change it here. And well, what name should I have? Well, for the moment, I'm just going to call them unnamed tab and like number, you know, 1, 2, and 3. So that's why I add 1, 3 I there. And finally, I just give it the ID. So far, I'm just going to do that. So nothing special. Now it's going to complain down here because you know we're referring to things weirdly. So let's loop through them as tabs instead, because now they are tabs. So nothing too special. We just have a special version of, well, that's special, I guess, of the rectangle where we have a name as well. So what do we want to do with this name? Well, like I said, we wanted to draw some text for their names. You know, if we hover our mouse over it, maybe we want to know what tab it is. And how do we do that? Well, we've seen that before. And this is going to be very simple. GUI tab, tabs, tab, dot, drawstring, this, x, y, oops, y, and finally tab, dot get name. We don't have to bother about anything else when we draw this mouse over thing here. We have set it up so we can loop through the tabs, we can get a name from a tab, and we can draw a mouse over thing of a rectangle, and since the tab is also a rectangle, we can just do it like that. Just a very simple loop and one statement to do the drawing. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's take a look. Right. Okay, so what happens now? Well, there we go. We have the different names here. When I hover the mouse in here, what we're going to get is the the name of the tabs, and that will be shown there next to the mouse, like that, so we can know what they are called. But at the moment, they have very silly names. They have just unnamed tab 1, unnamed tab 2, and unnamed tab 3, and so on. So a bit silly, you know. But maybe we should create proper tabs. You know, at the moment, these are not proper tabs. They don't affect the content here. It's the same content all the time because it doesn't have anything to do with the tabs themselves. How do we do this? Well, what we want to do is, when we have the first tab opened, then we want to draw this thing. Otherwise, we don't. When we have the second one, we want to draw something else, and the third one, we want to draw something else entirely. So, wouldn't it make sense to tell the tab itself to be able to draw this? And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, we're going to allow the tabs to do things, and then when they, well, when they are doing that, we can just refer to the active tab and tell the active tab to do the work. So if, for instance, the first tab is active, then we tell the first tab you can draw. If the second tab is active, then we tell the second one to draw. You'll see in a bit. So what we want to add here is a few different methods. We want to have public abstract void draw background. To draw the background, we need the GUI, and we need the X and Y, like so. And that's abstract, so there you go. Then what we want is public abstract void draw foreground, if I can spell. And the same things here. GUI machine, GUI, int X, int Y. Then public. I'm not going to make the following ones abstract. I'm going to allow you to override them if you want to, but you don't have to specify them if you don't want. And these are basically the ones that you can use to control if, well, the mouse is clicking and so on. Because even if you don't draw something specific just because the tab is not open, that doesn't mean that well, we should allow that tab to control the clicking, you know. Otherwise we will all of a sudden click on something that we can't see, and that's not how it's supposed to be. Mouse, move, click, we have that one as well. GUI machine, uppercase, int x, int y, and int button. Long time since clicked, like that. So I'm just setting up a few methods here. What are you doing? I forgot that one. And finally, I'm going to add a last one. We haven't talked about this at all. Well, we touched on it, I guess. I'm going to use mouse released here. We'll see how I'm going to use that later on. So now when we've set it up like this, what we can do is simply move the code for that specific, the layout there that we want to draw in one specific tab. We can move that to a specific, public abstract, derp. We can move that to a specific tab, and then we can just have that tab and just then draw that tab with its content. And what we want to do is create this tab here. First, oops, that's the wrong thing, not an interface. Sorry. Class here, and what we want to do is then GUI tab, and I'm going to call this custom, I guess. This is the custom layout tab. Extends GUI tab, public GUI tab custom, and I want the ID like this. So we just say custom layout, an ID like that. Okay, so that's just the silly part, but now the important part, because we should implement these methods, right? So we tell it, how do you draw your content? You're a tab, like how do you do it? And well, therefore we'll have to move most of the code that we have here to that specific tab. So just a lot of copying and so on, which might be a bit annoying, but it should go fairly quickly. And just to be able to work with things properly, I'm going to show the rectangles here are protected so I can reach them, and the same thing goes with a machine. You could make getter methods as well if you want to. I'm just going to make these protected so it goes a bit quicker in this example here. Right, so what we want to do is head over to the background. Where is the background being drawn? Here. So look at this. That's how we draw the background for this specific grid here. We just loop through the rectangles and so on. Okay? And therefore I want to put it in here. Unfortunately, I need to calculate the type again, because that's, well, not going to be sent along. So I'm just going to add this code here, and there we go. And as you can see, we have a ton of errors, and the reason why we have a ton of errors here well, because, well, what is the machine? Well, that's the GUI.machine. So we need to modify it slightly, just because we moved the location like this. And then we want GUI machine.rectangles. That's a static one, so that's why I refer to it by its name, like so. X size, well, that's 176. We could make a getter for that, but it doesn't really have too much to do with the X size. It's just where we can find it in the texture. So I guess it makes sense to just add that there. Here we want a GUI. When we draw things, we don't want to refer to the tab. Unless we change that, of course. And there you go. So there you go. All of a sudden, we tell the tab to do this functionality, and that's the same. That's going to be the same thing for the foreground. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we want to get the type here as well. Yes, because this tab here is just going to be used if we have that specific type. Draw GUI foreground is there. Okay. Grab this code. Move it over through this thing here. We want to do a similar thing here. GUI machine. There, and then refer to the GUI there, and finally here. So is that it? Well, we have to do it for the buttons as well, right? Well, for the clicking, mouse click, there you go. So head back here again. So I know when we reorganize some code, it might be a bit annoying. You have to do a few things, we'll move them around, but copy and paste is doing the trick most of the times. So here we have the same thing: GUI machine dot rectangles, GUI machine dot rectangles, and then it's just a matter of referring to the GUI here. GUI, like so. So what happens now? We have something called current mode. We don't have something called current mode in here. Well, that's sort of the reason why I wanted these to not be static, because then we can just bump, put fields here, and they are going to unique to each tab we have. So that's the reason why I didn't. Well, one of the reasons why I didn't want the tabs to be static in here, because well, these are not static, while the rectangles can totally be static because we're not going to change any values in them. And then it's just a matter of importing the packet handler like that. There you go. And so we are missing one method still, and that's the thing there, and that's the mouse move one. There you go. Well, you can move up there, I guess. And just the final time we do this, GUI machine.rectangles, GUI machine.rectangles. Here we go, GUI.machine, GUI.machine, and finally we give it to GUI like that. There you go, now we're done here. But obviously this code is not going to be called. Mouse move click is not going to be called. Mouse click is not going to be called. Draw foreground is not going to be called, and neither is draw background. So how do we set this up properly? Well, like I said, we want the active tab to do all the work. So active tab dot mouse move click. This is the GUI, then XY button time since clicked. Boom, that's done. Here we want to do the same thing. Active tab dot mouse click instead. This XY button like so. We want to be able to draw the foreground, right? Yes, we do want that. So then it's just a matter of doing, you guessed it, active tab dot draw foreground. This XY. I don't know why it suggests type there. It should be Y. And finally, we want to do it here as well. And this is the background. Active tab dot draw background like so. So this is everything that we have to do to make tabs. We create them and tell the tab itself to do the rendering code, and then we just tell the active tab to actually render things. So if a GUI tab custom is not the active tab, then we won't see the grid. We won't draw any mouse over for the grid. We won't even accept clicks for the grid. Well, if you click it, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything at all because it's not going to be called. But of course, we need to actually create those tabs. So what I'm going to do here is the following. There you go. So GUI tab custom 0. There you go. But it's a bit boring with what's wrong with you? Silly me, we need to create a new one. But it's a bit boring with just one tab, and we don't have any other types of tabs to add. So I'm just going to add a GUI tab test for testing purposes. And the only thing we're going to do here is extend GUI tab and then add a constructor. So public GUI tab test. We get the ID super test ID, and finally just implement these methods. And so remember, you need to override the abstract methods, but it doesn't force us to actually add anything in there. And head back to the GUI machine, and when we have this here, we can just create new GUI tab test 1, and finally new GUI tab. I misspelled that one, I know. There you go. So now let's start and see the magic of tabs. There you go. So now we'll see that we'll only tell the active tab to actually do anything, and that means that, well, at the moment it's going to look like this, but if I click on another tab, that's going to disappear. Why? Well, now at the moment we have the second tab as the active one, so we're going to tell the second tab you can do your drawing code. We tell the second tab you can draw your foreground. You can, well, do things depending on where the mouse are, things like that. And that's the only tab that will actually receive that privilege to do so. And if we take a look in GUI tab test, it's obviously not going to do anything at all. It's completely empty here. That's the purpose. We are going to use it for testing. But if we click on the topmost tab here, that's the custom layout one, then that's the only one that has the privilege to actually do something, to render anything, to accept any information from the mouse, you know. And therefore we're going to draw it like this. Yes, because if we take a look at GUI tab custom, this is how we draw the background, this is how we draw the foreground, this is how we do, well, how we handle the mouse click, and that's how we handle the mouse dragging click thingy, like that. So all of a sudden we have 3 different tabs like this, that actually displays different things, and we can set them differently like so. So it's fairly simple to set up your own tab system, and depending on what you want with them, you can place them in different locations and do different things with them. For instance, you can put them on the side here if you want to, on the side here if you want to, on the bottom if you want to, behind everything. That would be very weird, but totally possible. So that's pretty much it for now. We'll actually create 2 different types of tabs, well, 2 more different types of tabs to put in these locations. They are not going to be empty, but that's going to be after the break, so I'll see you in about 15 minutes.